All right, what's up, Team Diadem? We're back with another Courtside Sessions episode, and today we're joined with somebody that I've been trying to get on this podcast for, I don't know, maybe a year now. Diadem Sports co-founder AJ Bartlett.
Hey guys, how we doing?
I know I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing great, man. I'm glad to finally be able to get on here. We've been trying for a little bit, but
finally in town.
We made it.
Yeah, that's what AJ's actually based out in California. And tell us a little bit about where you're out there.
So I'm based in Los Angeles. I'm on the West Coast, so I go back and forth a lot. I travel a lot for a lot of different events, and also go to Asia a lot for a lot of our sourcing and things that we're doing over there.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that. But I think first, let's start and learn a little bit more about how Diadem got started at the early days.
Oh boy, yeah. So Diadem got started as an idea that I had after playing some competitive tennis throughout junior tennis all the way through USTA and national events, and played some college tennis, and then played a little bit of pro tennis, and then kind of had this idea as I started teaching tennis that I wanted to kind of get on the business side of tennis, and got in touch with Evan and said, hey man, I got this idea. And then we kind of just, took it from there.
And then you guys started with just strings back in the day,
Yeah,
right?
Solstice Power. I mean, it's our go-to string and still our, most popular and kind of what we're known for in the tennis industry. And we started with the one string, and we, started taking it to tournaments, tournament by tournament, handing out string, 7-8 years ago, and just going to, junior events and just saying, hey, you looking for more spin? Try this out. And, that's where we started, and it's, carried into, we're here now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and with the latest, the court burst coming out.
Oh, I got mine.
You got players head to toe, rackets, balls, bags, string. You're in the pickleball world a little bit, if not a leader in that space, but it's really, really cool to see what you've built here.
Hey, yeah, no, well, thanks for being a part of it, man. I mean, you guys have been a huge help for everything that we're doing and helping spread the word, and, passing the baton on to being the guy that's going to all those events and letting them know about the Diadem, which we're glad to have you on here. So
yeah, for sure. And we'll learn a little bit more about how you laid the foundation and the groundwork there shortly. But before we dive into your junior and college career, I might be wrong, but I think you have an ATP point under your belt, no?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get a couple of those throughout my career a few different times. So I secured a few. Unfortunately, I no longer have any of them. But, maybe that's for another time. But, so it's I was able to play some pretty, high-level tennis there for a bit, which was fun. And I was lucky enough to play, got a wild card into the BMP Indian Wells qualifying like 07 and 08. So that was kind of like the highlight of my career, and being able to be a practice partner for a lot of the pro players that would come into town. So I was kind of based and trained out of Indian Wells Tennis Garden for quite some time in my junior days. So I was lucky enough to play with Federer and Safin, and got hired to be a hitting partner for like Kim Clijsters and Justine Henin and Martina Hingis, and so I had a pretty fun playing career at that time, and got me set up to kind of get into college tennis and play on the tour a little bit. So
yeah, for sure. I think that's really interesting. And let's rewind back to your junior days, because this is a podcast primarily for junior players, parents, and coaches.
Of course.
So let's hear a little bit about how AJ got into tennis in the beginning.
Yeah, so I started playing tennis when I was like 5 or 6. My parents tried to get me out there. I took one tennis lesson, and I came off the court and said I hated it, so I didn't play after that. But after a few years, I kind of got back into tennis. I started taking some lessons, and I started playing. I was about 9, 10, and then my parents actually used to go to, at the time it was like out at La Quinta or Indian Wells, a big tournament out there, and we weren't living in the Palm Desert area at the time, so they would go for vacation. And one year they actually took me with me to the tournament with them, and so I went to Indian Wells and saw all the players and went to the practice matches and everything, and was there, and I just like kind of fell in love with tennis. And so at that point on, I was like all in on tennis, and I was like training every day and playing tournaments because I like saw this pro event and like this is the coolest thing. And so
what was it about that event that really like drew you in?
I don't know. I think I just, I mean, when I look back at it, I mean, obviously I was pretty young, like 10, 11 years old, but I think just seeing all the fans and the people and the players, and just like, I think the big lights, and it got me excited, I guess. I don't know. So it just kind of sparked that, like, what you need, I think, from any player, somebody to want to be, you could be passionate about it. And so creating that, spark and desire of something of like, oh, I think I want to like achieve something like this. I think is kind of where it all started.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really cool too because you see a lot of juniors that are almost forced into the game by their parents and coaches and that sort of thing. So I think that to be the most successful, like you mentioned, it needs to come from within the player for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you need a little bit of help from mom and dad and stuff to make sure that you're, showing up and doing some of your things. I have a 3-year-old now who I've, he loves sports and loves doing, we're, throwing the balls around and just kicking soccer balls and playing a little tennis and loves golf. And so it's fun to see. But yeah, I mean, kind of to your point, like, I don't really have a desire to like push him heavily into any one direction because I want him to be like, I'm super passionate about, whether it's tennis or golf or pickleball or football or something like that. But he does need help getting kind of like, hey, let's try this, let's try that, and kind of get pushed into it a little bit. But the forcing of like, hey, you got to play 6 hours a day. If you're doing that, you're in trouble already from that perspective. So in my mind, just kind of from some of the experience I had with my parents where it was, oh, you're not practicing 2 times a day or you're not doing this or that. And it's like, finding that balance of what it is. And like you said, I mean, it really has to come within because of, my parents want me to practice more so I can get better results or do whatever. I mean, it's not really going to translate unless it's really something that I think that the player or student really wants to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good word is balance from the player to the parents to the coaches, a good balance as they're coming up through the game. And
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, I think when you look at some of the stuff, they've even talked about certain athletes not like specializing so young. Mm-hmm. Like if so many of these kids start playing tennis at 5 or 6 years old, which is awesome, and I think you get a lot of like really good like hand-eye coordination, and you learn like the feel and the touch of the game that you just get from over time playing, which is huge, especially the younger you start. But the cross training, like playing soccer or playing basketball or doing things that kind of keeps it fun and also keeps that like team environment. The tennis court's a lonely place. I mean, it can get lonely real quick. So having that summer like team camaraderie, especially early on, and I think it just makes you more athletic. I mean, just trying to do things that can get you to be a more competitive, athletic person that can then help translate onto the court, I think is huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so you were about maybe 11, 12 when you started really getting into it?
Yeah, well, that was the full-time gig when I was kind of like 11 or 12.
Okay, and then what was junior tennis like in your area at that time?
So at the time I was in southern Utah, so I played in the Intermountain section, and so it was we traveled a lot for tournaments. I mean, it was like, I played tournaments in my section to just, play to qualify for the rankings and all that. It was Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, and Idaho. So it was some long haul trips going to, Montana to play a tournament or something like that. So a little bit different than, South Florida or Southern California where you drive 20 minutes and you can kind of get to any of the tournaments you need to for the year. So a little bit different, but it was good. I think the density of players obviously was a lot less, and you look at some of the like hotbeds of tennis, Texas, Florida, Southern California, even the southern section. But the quality at the top was there. It was a little light as far as total overall, players playing in the events.
Totally. How'd you work through kind of like that adversity, having to travel more than a lot of other players in different regions, like you mentioned? Was that something that was difficult for you, or something that you really enjoyed while you were a younger player?
I mean, I was pretty young, so I mean, when I played most of my Intermountain tennis, it was between like 12 and 16. I think I started playing some of that. So I was lucky enough. I think I like jerry rigged like some sort of power outlet and brought a huge TV and like connect my Xbox and play like along the way. So mom and dad were the ones Uber driving to wherever we were headed, right? So from that perspective, it was fine. I didn't have a problem with the traveling. It was pretty easy, and I was lucky enough that like my parents would be able to go with me and do all that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of fun. I mean, we built good relationships with a lot of these kids because it became really good friends because they were all kind of in the same thing. Your like weekends are not only just tournaments and then going home. You're like spending 3 or 4 days like in a city. So you're like going to play miniature golf or doing this or going to dinner with like the kids you're like kind of competing against and playing against. So we all became like really, really good friends.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing about junior tennis, especially I see at the national level when it's players that are traveling all over the country and they get into these different towns 100%. And are able to kind of like hang out throughout the year. Yeah. Is that something that you're still friends with a lot of those guys to this day? Or
yeah, what? I mean, some of those guys definitely. I mean, I think, even like something like when I played, it's the futures and stuff, that's how like Evan and I stayed connected through at the time, after we'd stopped playing tennis, wasn't even tennis. It was through like other interests that we had, fantasy basketball or NBA or whatever else that it was. And then when we had the idea, it's like, hey man, we're still buddies. Like I have this idea through tennis. And so, yeah, I mean, with the junior guys, there's definitely some guys that I still see or I see around on Instagram and stuff like that are out there. But yeah, it's long-lasting relationships for sure.
Yeah, it's, I think one of the cooler things about tennis is that relationship aspect. So when you were coming up, you were, I don't know, maybe 14, 15, 16. Was your goal to go to the pros? Was it to play in college? What was kind of your headspace then?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back at it, I think it was like overly optimistic of like, yeah, let's go play. I think I want to play pro tennis. Like that's my goal, right? And so, I mean, I think that's where it was. And then as it kind of like progressed along, then I was like, okay, I kind of want to play. And I got a little bit more serious about it as I got closer towards like college and that. It's like, okay, I really want to use college as a like a springboard to kind of go on and play pro tennis, because it's like, you know, how tough it is out there and what it requires, not only, you know, physically, mentally, you got to have the game, but then also like the financial aspect of it. It's like probably one of the biggest components of it for a lot of the guys that are transitioning from, you know, high level junior college, high level college tennis into the pro scene.
Totally, and I think that's something that has been really interesting to talk to players from different generations. Yeah. For example, we had Mark Knowles, who ended up winning a Grand Slam, but he talked a little bit about how during his generation, it wasn't really college wasn't really like that springboard to the pros. It was either you're playing pros or you're done. And so I think that's kind of cool that you viewed it that way and was able to use college to help propel your game.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of different outlooks, but I mean, I think we even just were looking at, you know, for some of the stuff that we're trying to do for next year, we were kind of going through the top 100, 200, and of all these guys, I mean, there's a huge percentage that are using college now as a big gateway to kind of get there. And there's, you know, different programs that are set up now for players to come in, and I think they're kind of catering towards guys that, you know, want to go pro and like help them play more events and do things and maybe help them fundraise a little bit to help propel their career and like be able to sustain a career on tour, because it's expensive to be able to bring the right coaches and things like that, and not just be like, okay, I played some college tennis and now I'm going to go out here and try to figure it out. And so I think there's a lot more like of a team kind of building type thing that helps these guys get into the right position to be able to be successful on tour.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's something that you see across the board now. It's kind of a group thought that college is a great pathway to the pros now, especially if you look at a lot of the young Americans on tour right now. Probably all of them played in college, had a really successful college career. So I think that's important for juniors now to see that that's one of the best ways to do it, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great safe way to do it too, right? You get to get your education, you get to like mature a little bit more, you still get to like experience life in some certain way, and then put yourself in a position to be successful, whether it's on tour, which isn't always necessarily the case, or, you know, after, you know, tennis, whether it's a successful career or not, and get back into whatever it is that you were passionate about, even in college tennis, what you like, in college academics or something like that. So.
Yeah, totally. And what was your recruiting process like when you were looking at going and playing in college?
So my recruiting process was a little bit interesting. I kind of was a little bit late to the game as far as what I was wanting to do college-wise, but it was cool. I mean, I talked to quite a few coaches. I was pretty like Southern California based. Like I was living in Southern California, so I was looking at schools like, you know, Pepperdine and San Diego and just kind of more local. I kind of really wanted to stay in there. And so that was kind of my process, reaching out to some coaches, and I was lucky enough, like I used Indian Wells. I was during the March tournament where I was hitting with some of the pro players to invite some coaches out and be like, hey, I'm around if you guys want to come check this out. And so that was a good way for me to reach out and kind of connect with coaches in that perspective.
And then what kind of led you to that next step in your career that gave you the kind of the encouragement to take it and go and get there?
Yeah, so, I mean, my instance with college tennis is a little unique. So I got ruled ineligible to play Division I college tennis. So I was recruited by some teams. I was brought on there, but it's a long story. But it was like I was in a 5-year court battle with the NCAA that ruled me ineligible to play D1, and it was my school district messed up my transcripts. And so it kind of like forced my hand in what I wanted to do. So it really kind of changed my pathway of what I was wanting to do as far as playing for a top D1 program, and then kind of use that to like build my foundation. I was still super young. I graduated early at 17. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. So I ended up playing for a Division II school at BYU Hawaii, which is one of the top D2 programs in the country. They won multiple national championships. And so I was able to play there for a year before I decided to start trying to go out and play some pro events. So my hand was forced a little bit, but so yeah, it's a little bit unique.
Yeah, totally. What was the culture like when you were there, as far as like the team aspect of college tennis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most fun part of college tennis, right? Is like getting the guys that are excited about, playing the next event and winning, and you kind of get that camaraderie, and you're practicing together and training together with like, the one goal in mind to say, okay, we want to like go win this. So I think that's something that, you don't normally get in tennis, obviously, because like I said a little bit, it's a little lonely out there sometimes. You're out there by yourself, battling away. So having that team aspect, I think, is like super important for, kids to like feel and see and be a part of. And luckily there's a few avenues for like kids earlier on. Like I remember playing like zonals and stuff like that, some of the team stuff, in the 14s and 16s, to where you can kind of get a little bit of that element. It's nowhere near like what the college tennis is, because you're putting in like the grueling work of the early morning workouts and all that kind of stuff with your team, but it kind of gives you a little bit of that like, that team aspect, which is fun to like cheer on your teammates and buddies, and with the goal of trying to win that thing. So it's it was a good experience.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And then I think it's something cool too for juniors to understand that the college atmosphere is a little bit more exciting, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little rowdier, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think it's the different elements of where you can get to. I mean, it's like you can definitely get people excited. Guys are very fired up on the court a bit more. You got a lot of fist pumps and come-ons and things like that happening, which does happen in junior tennis a lot. But I think that in the college themes, there's definitely coaches that definitely preach that and really want that like high intensity, bringing it to the team and their surrounding courts, and letting their teammates know that they're there. So
yeah, 100%. Let's talk a little bit about the realities of playing pro tennis.
Yeah.
As someone so young getting in the tour, what is that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to try to, figure out how to go play some of these events, and I was able to travel all over. I mean, I played tournaments in Central America, South America, Australia, played in Africa once, Asia, and then played out through the U.S. and Mexico. But yeah, I mean, it was, I think it's kind of shaped me as a person. It was one of the biggest learning things of my career, just kind of figuring out how to like navigate and this was back before like the phones and like you get like totally. Now I travel a lot for work. It's pretty easy. I can grab an Uber. I can find anything that I want, go anywhere I want to go in any country and kind of be okay. Even have some Google Translate or stuff like that. But I mean, this was like, I remember trying to learn a few Spanish words before I hopped on my flight to Mexico to hope that I could get on the right bus to make it to the right place that could then hopefully get me a taxi to the hotel or the tournament venue we're playing at. So it's you had these like little fact sheets that you had to check, and you're like, oh, this is the tournament hotel, this is the address. Like, I don't know, figure it like that's it. You have your like printed sheet of paper and walk on the plane. So it's it took a big leap of confidence at that time. I remember my parents were always like, oh man, where are you going? And I was young, 18, 19 and doing some of that stuff. So it was, you learn a lot real quick. You got to do it. And it's just like anything, you adapt, you figure it out. But it was, looking back at it, it's pretty wild.
No, it's for sure wild. What was your favorite place that you got to travel to while you were playing pro tennis?
So, I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard this from a lot of these guys. I mean, you don't see a lot, right? Like you're there, you're like, okay, in and out, you play. If you win, great. You lose, you're like on to the next tournament or getting home or going wherever that may be. I think some of the places that I enjoyed, let's see. I mean, honestly, some of my favorite, probably my best memories outside of playing like the Indian Wells tournament, which is but was playing in the futures level. I really enjoyed playing some of the tournaments in Mexico. Because they the futures events for them, especially at the time. I mean, they've had some of the ATP events now with Acapulco and Los Cabos and some of the stuff. But at the time, the futures were kind of their big events. And so I'd play these futures events, and they would do legit night matches and have 1,000 people show up for a match, and they're have a sick pseudo stadium court. And so it it was cool. You're like playing in a real environment. We're playing against like the team that won their Davis Cup, or like some of their up and coming players or other foreigners. But I remember I had one term I played in Monterey, and it just reminds me of like it was fun. We won a couple of matches, and I think we ended up losing to like the Davis Cup team that played there in 3 sets. But it was like the energy was just so cool. Like I think that was something that probably a lot of these like top players get from playing at Grand Slams or whatever, totally. Some of the bigger events. And so something like that I think is from a memory for me, just that amount of people there, I think it was fun.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear. I can only imagine what that's like. Playing a game that's so mentally challenging with such a big crowd is probably a little bit different.
And going against you too, which was a little bit kind of fun, right? So it's like everyone's cheering against you, which is cool in a different way. If you can channel that, you can like kind of use it as fire, which we did, which was kind of fun. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then I guess kind of an interesting thing is for every professional athlete, at some point their career is going to come to an end. Yeah. What was that process and that moment, that period of time like for you when you realized it?
Yeah, I mean, my career, when I look back at it, when I played these tournaments and stuff was like, I had a lot of injuries and certain things and like financial situations, which pretty much every futures level, challenger level guy will tell you. It's like, the finances or whatnot, and then I had a couple of injuries. And so I think I just got to the point where I was just like, this is just too tough. Like it's taxing. Like I get hurt, then I come back, I'd play some money tournaments, try to save up some cash, do a few things, go play a few events. And it's just like, it's not a successful way to really become an elite athlete. And I think that there's, you really have to have the team and certain things to put yourself in a position to do it and there's other things I probably could have done better to be more disciplined and put myself in a position to perform better and do things that I didn't do that I can look back on and be like, I probably should have done some certain things a different way, but you learn. And I think that's where I've taken with Diadem, the mistakes that I made in my tennis career of like what I could have done or should have done. I was like, I want to make sure that I'm never going to look back and regret on it that I didn't do X, Y, Z, which I think we try to really bring into the Diadem brand and with all of the people that we work with here is like the effort is everything, and like putting that forward is like the number one thing so that we don't have any regrets when we look back and be like, we got this deal, we lost this deal, it's not because of effort, it was because it just didn't work out, but we're going to always put ourselves in a good position because of that. So
yeah, 100%. That's something that I see from our leadership here at Diadem all the way down to people working in our warehouse. It's a high effort business. So that's really cool to hear that a lot of that was shaped through your career in playing tennis.
100%. Yeah.
And then after you kind of wrapped up your pro touring days, you got into coaching, right?
Yeah, I started coaching a lot. So I left once I stopped teaching tennis. I took a job and I moved to LA and I started teaching tennis out there for a number of years.
What was that transition like for you?
It was great because I started making a lot of money and I had none, so I actually loved it, to be honest. But I started making money to where I was like could sustain myself in a way where I was like, okay, this is cool. Like living like I was 24, I think, when I moved to LA, and I started teaching tennis and built up a really good clientele base there, and was teaching close to 60 hours a week, and tennis lessons in LA aren't cheap, so I was lucky enough that helped out, and it's kind of where I got the money to save up to start Diadem. I was teaching 60 hours a week every week, and finally built up some cash, and when we had the idea, I was like, what do you think? And that's kind of how it all started.
That's awesome. Do you have any advice for young coaches that are kind of starting their teaching careers, young professionals in that area?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Like I did pretty much mine was mostly like recreational, it was like at the club level. That was mostly kids just wanting to learn how to play tennis, or people kind of getting in, how do I improve my game? I'm a 3-5, I want to become a 4-0 or 4-5 or stuff like that. And then some young juniors, there was a handful of kids that were trying to like up their level in like Southern California junior tennis. But a lot of it was like more recreational. For the coaches, I think it's really just kind of, keep bettering yourself. I think that's something that's so cool now with like, especially with social media, is like as you go on, you can see so many great drills, so many new ideas of ways people are thinking about it. And I think trying to figure out, just keep learning and how you can implement that stuff into your own methodology or teaching. And yeah.
I think that's a great point there, is that you can always keep learning and getting better. And I imagine that's once you got into starting Diadem in the early days there, that was probably something you were doing all the time, right? It's learning and iterating and getting better.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it now, like what, when I look back at it, like if I hadn't done Diadem, what would I be doing? And I think that's what it would be like. How do I keep becoming a better coach? And if it was depending on what I wanted to do, right? If I want to be a director of tennis, do I want to get into high level coaching of like, performance players or college tennis? But like, yeah, figuring out what that is, and then just keep getting better at that craft of like, how do I, if it's especially on the recreational side, like how do I teach somebody, like make it more simple for somebody to understand, and being able to teach the same thing in multiple ways, because not everybody learns the same way. Some people are more visual learners. Some are going to be, they want to watch you do it, or you need to they need to be told how to do it, or they've seen it written or whatever through video. But yeah.
That's awesome. And if people follow along on our Diadem social media, they probably see that I'm out at a lot of junior tournaments. And long before that was my job, it was your job. Talk a little bit about what that was like, kind of in the early days with just a couple sets of string going out to tournaments and trying to get players and parents and coaches and everybody to take Diadem into consideration.
Yeah, they kicked me out of my own job. I don't know how I just like all of a sudden like, this Kevin guy's taking over. I'm like, what? No, but yeah, it was fun. I mean, I look back at it. I mean, I was, for a significant portion when we started, we were still teaching full time. So it'd be like weekends. I remember I'd take like a red-eye flight to some junior tournament and like set up a table and like hand out string for a bit. And yeah, it was mostly it was solstice. I mean, that's what we had. So it was like just kind of getting people to try it out and use it, and we had some good success early on. We were able to get a lot of good juniors that were playing at some high level stuff early on, and just kind of continue to kind of like roll that in and find, just keep finding events. And at those events, we would talk to stringers, we talk to coaches, talk to parents. I mean, I think my biggest thing is that I felt that I did pretty well at the time was like getting in touch with the parents, because most kids are like, yeah, sure, okay, and they like throw it in their bag or like, okay, cool. But it's having those conversations with parents and saying like, so what are you doing? Like, how can we, what's their setup? What are they doing? And some would know and some wouldn't, or they'd be like, let me text my coach, or like, let me ask whoever, right? And so I think it was being able to like kind of be like a springboard, like from some knowledge, and kind of give them some ideas on stuff. And it wasn't always just like, hey, it has to be Diadem. I'm like, hey, you should make sure your kids are playing with like thinner gauge strings or like hybrids or whatnot and stuff like that. And I think that translated pretty well and got people like excited about wanting to try what we were doing, because it wasn't just like this, which it is the best string out there, but it was like also just kind of giving some educational information and helping them out, like, because it's you're still trying to figure it out, especially with the younger events, which is a lot what we started with was the 12s and 14s. It's like, yeah, I don't know what my kid's using, or I don't know what he should be using, and like we have him in the right string setup and things like that. And so I think that was pretty integral into it all.
Totally, and that's something that I've learned from you specifically, is that we're here to really help parents. Yeah. That's part of why we started this podcast, for players, parents, and coaches to get some inside view into some of the industry leaders, top players, coaches, and everybody that's really shaping the game. So I appreciate you teaching me that along the way.
Hey man, that's what we're here for.
100%. And what as Diadem has kind of evolved, obviously you started with just string. Now we have the full product line. Yeah. How's your role changed? And talk a little bit about more what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, for us, I mean, as the company's grown and we have all these great people here that are working with us and helping us grow the brand, I'm traveling quite a bit and helping a lot on the, always was on the product development side, and then a little bit in all the different avenues of the brand. But yeah, it's mostly focused on like, business development, like how are we going to continue to grow and getting into new markets, and like strategy stuff, like, how do we make Diadem more relevant for people? Do they see it more? How are they perceiving it? And like, how do we continue to kind of just get it more accessible for people? Because I think like we've talked about, and we always talk about with the team, is it's like, if we can get the product in people's hands, we know the product's really good. If we get the product in people's hands, we have a really high conversion rate. And so it's just a matter of, how do we continue to, do a better job to educate people about Diadem and give them opportunities to kind of get involved with us and become part of the team.
100%. And I think one of the more exciting things that you get to do is travel all around the world. Yeah. And obviously that's partially due to Diadem's presence globally. Talk a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah. So like, we have our setup now in Europe. I think you've had Christian out here before on some of the podcasts. And so he's an incredible resource for us in running and operating, Diadem Europe. And then, we're, as we're continuing to grow the brand a lot right now in Asia, both in tennis and pickleball, we're getting involved with a lot of things over there, and we're trying to, be very relevant there and putting ourselves in a position to be kind of a leader in the space, especially in pickleball, but also in tennis. There's a good opportunity for us. We're kind of just keep chipping away at what we're doing with the tennis and get people aware of what we're doing.
That's great. And before we wrap it up, what can players, parents, and coaches across the country and across the globe expect to see from Diadem in the coming years?
I think you're going to continue to see what we've done, what we've built, which is built a company on like great product, and we're going to continue to get a better job of just getting it to you guys and let you guys see, what we've created and what we've done, and introducing it to you and just getting it in your hands. And so I think that's really what you can expect to see from Diadem, and then the team that we have here is helping us being able to just become more of a global brand and get it into everybody's hands. So.
That's great. And I appreciate you taking the time to fly all the way from California to South Florida in our studio at Diadem HQ for this podcast.
Wouldn't miss it. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
100%. And we'll be back with more Courtside Sessions episodes soon enough. As always, special thank you to our production team here at Diadem Sports for everything they do to make this possible and bring the episodes to you at your home, in your car, on the way to the courts, on the courts, wherever you listen. If you didn't know, we're available on all platforms now: iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, other ones that I've never even heard of before. You can find Courtside Sessions. Just wanted to say thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back again soon.